of our last events. Of course, the big thing is getting everyone out there by Tuesday in whatever way to get out and vote. We want to thank the Lewin Fund and Battle to Beat Cancer, also the Petaluma Art Center. And I have to click this, okay. All of you who are joining, thank you for joining us in this conversation with Bud and AmandaLynn and Kathryn. We want to talk about truth to power and art as action. And there's so many things to touch upon that I'm looking so forward to hearing the thoughts of all three of these artists. I would like to introduce you to each of the artists. Bud is a contemporary and public artist whose work revolves around socio-political folklore and universal magic. From large-scale murals to sculpture and video, Bud Snow is not defined by medium, rather ideas. Based in Oakland, California, Bud has been making art full-time over the last decade. Why she became involved in our Get Out and Vote campaign was she said, "I wish for nothing more than the individual knowing their own power to make positive change in their own lives and in their communities. Voting is one way to make a droplet that altogether makes a wave." We also are joined by Kathryn St. Clair, who received her BFA in studio art with honors from the University of Texas at Austin and received her MFA in painting and printmaking from the Massachusetts College of Art and Design in Boston. She was awarded the William J. Fulbright Scholarship to Barcelona, Spain for painting in 1997. Kathryn's current work is focused on drawings, watercolor, and oil on canvas landscapes of imagined places and abstract work. Why she became involved in the Get Out and Vote campaign was because she said, "I vote because it's a way to affect change. Voting is about choosing the right policies and people who have your best interests in mind when making decisions. Go vote and make the decision before someone else makes it for you. Voting lends my voice to the things that are important to me, my family, my community, and my country." And AmandaLynn, who is a muralist, a fine artist and art director based in the North Bay of California. Inspired by the female form and spirit, AmandaLynn depicts strong, enchanting women and illustrates their mystery through color and line work, often supporting them with depictions of natural elements. Her works can be found in galleries and streets all over the world. AmandaLynn believes that sharing the creative process with others is the key to living an inspired life. And she became involved because she says, in this case, because she worked with Lady Mags on this particular project, our work is meant to be local, national, and global. In unprecedented times, vote in any way you can, by mail, in person, by protesting, by donating, by creating, from home, from the streets, from the web. When all of us act, change happens. So thank you all for joining me today and having this conversation. And then I guess if you want to know a little about me, I am the Registrar of the Eames Collection. I'm also one of 5 grandchildren of Charles and Ray Eames, and I am from a bronze sculptor from my paternal side of the family. So the way I respond is by making something, and that's what I wanted to talk about today with each of our guests. For our event, and this is where I'm going to ask you, could you cue up, Parker, the first image, please, for the getoutandvote.art? Amy, Cindy, and I launched a multifaceted program intended to activate and inspire all who participate with the underlying call to action of getting out the vote in November. We reached out to Bud and to AmandaLynn and to Kathryn to join and help motivate people to want to go out and vote. And it was really a special moment because in many ways, people were not going out and we wanting to communicate, which is why we created a website to both give voting resources, but also inspiration for being able to share these pieces. They were turned into t-shirts, postcards, posters, and were spread out across the country, locally and nationally. I'd like to go to the first one, Bud. That first one, that beautiful rabbit. Next slide, that one. What I found when working with the artists, what I loved is there was a message within the message. It's saying vote, but here in Bud's piece, there's such a playfulness and a lightness. It's very engaging, and all the works are engaging in different ways. Could I go to the next one, please? This is Kathryn's piece. And again, it has a very recognizable icon like the Statue of Liberty. But when you look closer, you notice what's happening in the background. And having had conversations with Kathryn, the environment is also a very important issue to consider. So a message within the message. And then the last one, please, AmandaLynn's and Lady Mag's. it's so inviting, this beautiful place. And when I spoke to AmandaLynn, it was really wonderful hearing about how when she creates some of these spaces, it's really very sensitive to what the flora and fauna and the color and the palette of whatever area. It's very site specific. And so it's just so engaging and inviting too. What I would like to do is also be able to have now each of the artists, and we're going to begin with Bud Snow. I would like stop hearing from me and hear from the artists themselves. And Bud, would you start with your series of images of some of your artist activism, please?
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
So I feel like my work has inherently always been political since I was even a kid. You know, I grew up skateboarding and I grew up listening to punk music and making zines and taking photos of bands and skateboarding and skateboard art and punk art and all of these like subcultures when we're growing up, you know, they defined your mind as a kid. And so my work has always sort of come from that place as being a little bit against the grain, questioning authority, questioning, and also with a graffiti background, you know, you're always wanting to find beauty in place and beauty in community, and that's through activism, through painting illegally. So I would say inherently it's always been political, but in the last few years I've started to do more like outwardly political work and collaborations with other artists. And there's some images in here. So this is a gown I painted a few years ago. And I've worn this in New York in different feminist parades with Michelle Pred and many other feminist artists from all around the world. We could maybe go to the next slide here. I also paint murals as well. This is in Santa Rosa. And it's a memorial mural for a very close friend of mine, but she was an activist in Santa Rosa and beyond. She traveled all around the world doing activism. And so yeah, I want to celebrate life in my work as well as speak out about things I care about and celebrate what we do have in our community and our love for each other. So this is a processional banner for Laura Kelly, who's sort of an important ambassador in Santa Rosa, North Bay. Yeah, I do a lot of murals and I love murals, but I feel like there's ways to discuss certain ideas in different mediums. And I love getting those pangs of inspiration where I want to make a sculpture one day, or I want to make a little video. So we could go to the next slide. Maybe just like skip through them and we can, yeah, sure. Let's just kind of like skip. There's a lot of, I think.
Oh, no. I was saying the scale of the piece behind you with the scale of the piece that we're looking at, it's quite extraordinary. The scales in the range that you work in.
Yeah, it shows you like the difference from being up close to it and far away. 6 stories in Santa Rosa. That was by accident, that car driving by. I just happened to be there in that car drive by. And I love old cars. Like I've always had an old classic car since I was 16. I'm obsessed with like stylish, beautiful design, you know?
Right.
So that was pretty funny. Okay, next slide. Oh, painting trains. These are just like, there's just a smattering of images of all kinds, but
well,
again, sorry?
I love how you communicate the ideas in so many different canvases. Could you speak a little bit as you move on to the next slide about the idea? It always starts with the idea for you. And then
yeah, and sometimes that's an inspired idea in a moment, you know, where I'll just draw a woman resting on the train, like a large woman sprawled out and naked. Like, I just think that's such a beautiful form and harkens to all of our art history roots and our human roots. And so to celebrate the body, I think is a really beautiful thing and a form of activism as well. So a lot of my characters are like multi-genitalia, feminine and masculine at the same time. And you'll see this one is in Sweden, Stockholm. And yeah, there's like the cross sticks with the vaginas and the tips and the ball, the ball boobs on the bottom. I don't know if you guys can see that. but that's like a trans icon to me, you know. That's for all our trans friends that are finally able to speak out about their sexuality these days, and how we can all step forth into this new paradigm where we accept each other and we love each other for who we are, and we're not afraid anymore, you know. And
Right.
part of my work is about that idea, is not being afraid of color, not being afraid of your body, not being afraid of your gender or your sex or your orientation, not being afraid of other people, you know, not being afraid of animals. Like, let's love each other, let's love our environment, and create beauty around us. So, and then in this mural, we have like the dolphin for freedom. I also surf, and it's a huge part of my life. So the dolphin is significant of freedom. And yeah, the sisters connected by their hair. I think that like being like connecting to your psychic side is also really important, and it comes a lot into play in my work. And that is that we do have other senses that we're not really told about when we're young, you know. They're not included in the 5 sense rule. Like, but yeah, we do have senses, and part of those senses are feeling it in your arms and your shoulders when you talk to someone and they have the same idea, or they called you when you were thinking of them. And I don't know, I think harnessing that side of yourself is also a form of activism, and will help this a lot. Next slide. We can just kind of skip through these. Oh yeah, and then I make sculptures and masks and stuff that I grew up performing in kind of a street theater activist troupe with my dad when I was really young, and in Vancouver, BC, Canada. And so we always had there were always puppets around made out of essentially garbage. So I grew up working in all kinds of materials, and it led me to just collect everything. So I take my packages apart from I order something online, and I take the package apart, and I'm like, wow, these vacuum sealed plastic pieces are so beautiful. Like, what can I do with these? So coming soon.
You know, the packaging often could be the most interesting part, but it's found objects that you're using, which is great.
I love it. I love it. So
I think you have a few of these.
yeah, just scroll through because there's a lot. I don't want to take up too much time, but I travel with these masks a lot, and I'll do performances in different cities, and other people will wear them. This is a phone booth that I took just the frame of the phone booth and then added light and sound and created this phone, and had a welder weld the base. And this stands free, so it doesn't need to plug in to an outlet or anything. It just stands free in a gallery. But I'll put different recordings on it. Like, I'll record my friends talking about graffiti in Oakland, their forms of activism, and I'll put that on the phone, and then the phone will be in a gallery for a month or whatever. But yeah, if you have any questions or anything, please feel free. This is actually a Michelle Pred and myself collabo purse. So she's famous for doing these vintage handbags with light up neon messages on them. And we did a collabo together. The next slide is my other, so that was sort of her side, and then this is my side of the handbag. Just more like graffiti, different places. I'll have a cast of characters, those same sisters showed up in that mural in Sweden, but you know, they're fun to draw, so I draw them all over. This was the other night, downtown Oakland. That artist Jenny Holzer came down with her truck, or she wasn't there, but her truck was there, her activist truck was there, and another artist projected all these beautiful images of actors with vote signs, and that's a Michelle Pred piece, the neon. We can just.
And where was this?
This is in Oakland, like in the redwoods, or out in the hills, but just about connectedness, you know, how we connect to each other and maintain connected to each other. And this was just in New York. We all went out to New York as part of a Wide Awakes. If you guys haven't heard of the Wide Awakes, I highly recommend looking into the Wide Awakes. They're an open source group of activists, artists, and creatives from all around the world. And it started as a resurgence movement from a group of activists in the 1800s called the Wide Awakes. And it was founded by a famous artist named Hank Willis Thomas, or sort of resurged by him. And it's really exciting movement. So I encourage all of you to check it out. It's all about creating a new world through creativity and collaboration and love. So you can imagine it was a
All
fun.
great things to unify over.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think there were a few more pictures. Yeah, there was another one.
That was us. Their whole thing is the cape. So the wide awakes used to wear capes.
Oh, okay.
And they marched in the street. They helped get Abraham Lincoln elected, and they assisted with the abolition of slavery in this country. So it's pretty cool, the work that they did as blue collar workers in the 1800s, and now artists are sort of adopting this movement. So that was also New York Stock Exchange.
What I really appreciate, Bud, and with each of the artists' work is it's your voice. Something that I talked to Kathryn about also was that as a sculptor, I'm very grateful being a sculptor as a woman in the 90s because no one was helping me. And you had to learn how to really say it in your own voice. And I never waited for someone to tell me when something was done. It was done when I said it was done. And I can see that with your work, but it's like, no, this is where this needs to be, or this is now the complete, what I wanted to say in this particular moment. And so I think we're also going to see some of this with Kathryn, how you responded. So Kathryn, can you take this over now and lead us some of your work?
Thank you, Bud. So we're going to start with the Parker when he's ready. I wanted to start with slide 4 when he's ready, but yeah, I received my BFA from the University of Texas at Austin, focusing on studio art, and in particular, I was a printmaker. My early work was drawn from myth, fable, and images of women in art historical paintings. This was my my twist on the three graces. my expression was sort of just beginning, and I feel really lucky that I had professors that supported my urges to express myself with these kinds of, for what at the time seemed like very bold work. Anyway, these graces, instead of being delicate and you know, highly traditionally feminine, they're burly and strong and confident. And next slide, you can go to the next one. The next one is more typical of where I was going. I was interested in, oh no, slide 5. These images of women as monster, the idea of these anthropomorphic beings that that are from myths that were captivating to me as a child. I was always intrigued by, you know, the fact that these female figures and monsters always seem to exist, whether it was in, you know, Greek mythology or fairy tales, like the evil stepmother or the witch. And I was also interested in sort of women during the colonial era and the sort of societal pressures put on them. And really women struggling with their bodies was kind of one of the undercurrents of this idea as the woman is monster too. So on the next slide, I am drawing a lot from Greek mythology, you know, these stories of the female being seduced by a god, but usually it doesn't seem to be her choice. When you're a little kid reading these books, it feels as if, you know, Zeus is always imposing himself on these helpless females. And so in my work at the time, I was really struggling with, you know, where do I fit into society? Where does my freedom, you know, exist? You know, how far can I go? And I felt that all around, I had always grown up with these stories of, you know, women being held back, or women being in a, you know, supplicating kind of role, subservient. And so, for example, I was trying to turn some of the symbols and attributes of Catholicism and femininity on its head by saying, you know, well, here's Leda dancing with the swan, but she's throwing back these symbols of chastity and the lilies, and the symbols of fertility with the fruit, and the eggs are at her feet. She's not changing her direction for this creature. And then when I went into my MFA at the Massachusetts College of Art in Boston. You can go to the next slide, Parker. I was creating more of these anthropomorphic beings with my prints. These were creatures that were women who were incapacitated. They had, animal forms for legs. They had goat legs or chicken legs, and the wings were too small to fly. And this one on the left is balancing a peach on her head, but she's unable to climb over this wall. There were these ideas of women who were monstrous in maybe the size of their belly because their bodies didn't conform to the feminine ideal. And I was trying to convey that with these pieces of these creatures that I felt were really kind of pathetic and struggling. And through that, I started, if you want to go to the next slide, I started looking at more the idea of control and women struggling to control their bodies, women feeling the constraints of society, telling them they were too large, they were not feminine enough, they weren't desirable, their bodies weren't right. I really felt so strongly that that was an intense pressure at the time. And so I started doing these prints and drawings that had more to do with women in these diaphanous skirts. And the skirts were kind of this false sense of security. And the crinoline was, on the outside, when you put a dress over it, it changes the shape of the body, it hides the body. But in my prints and drawings going into my final pieces, they were vulnerable. They didn't realize they were as vulnerable as they were, but you could see through their clothing. So the idea of relinquishing control, accepting the body's natural tendencies, that was another theme, and probably still is with some of my other work. If you want to go to the next slide. So I got the Fulbright grant to Spain for painting and printmaking, and that was my long awaited dream. I wanted to go to the source of these dark images of women in Spanish, traditional Spanish and Catholic painting. And my proposal was to compare the images of these women in Catholic iconography to the way that women were portrayed in the contemporary Spanish media. So I was looking at symbols of female martyrdom and the attributes of these saints, Saint Lucy, who had her eyes plucked out, Saint Agatha, whose breasts were pinched off, Saint Kathryn with her torture wheel. And I was intrigued by the altarpieces, thinking this is the way that women were taught. These are the only images. No one had books lying around for the most part. Those were really expensive. And so I felt this sense of a connection to the past and women being, told over and over again what their role in society was. And for me, being in Spain and looking at these images over and over again, I really distilled what to me I saw as the common thread. And that was this temptress and the holy vessel, the idea of this dichotomy between seductive female and a virgin. And meanwhile, the eyes of society, as seen in this book and this image, the male gaze is dictating to women what they should be and how they should comport themselves. And so, if you want to go to the next slide, the idea of the woman as the vessel, and that is her use in society. Is she still worthy and valuable if she's not productive? Does she have to carry children to be considered a valuable member of society? I painted this image of the Virgin with the dress of crying eyes to show the sort of position I felt she was in as I was looking at all this, these eons of old work in Spain. I felt for the Madonnas. I felt, for example, in this piece, she's in a position where she doesn't have a choice. So she's being told to be the vessel, and she and her gown are weeping, and she's being swept up in her tears. And if you want to go to the next slide, that was one of my obsessions at the time, was all the Madonnas that represented all these different, my dog's getting to me, all of these different attributes. So the tears flowing constantly, and the Madonna being put into a position where she was just told she would be the vessel for the Messiah. And I felt like she was a kind of a passive creature. And I continued using those images, riffing off of the Madonna quite a bit for many years. But I felt like, you know, the question that came up for me was, where does the ownership of her body begin? Where does her own agency begin and end? Where does her future fit into what society is dictating for her? And as a young woman, I was really sincerely feeling all these pressures. So it was interesting to be in Spain doing my research and feeling like I was actually living the part of the single female constantly being asked why she wasn't married, why she didn't have kids yet. So if you want to go into the next one, Parker. So my work really, I came away from Spain with these pared down personal symbols, and they were eyes and eggs, and this idea of the vessel. And the eyes and eggs, when I moved to San Francisco, morphed into these spheres that resembled more the egg of a female within her body. And these landscapes I started doing were internal landscapes, but they're abstracted. So I felt like it wasn't such an overt, maybe, you know, scary kind of image where there were disembodied heads floating across the canvas, which was sort of something I was drawn to. But these abstracted landscapes for me were symbols of fertility, the idea that there's this rich, you know, inner landscape in each woman. And if you want to go to the next one, I was, you know, simultaneously learning to paint plein air and really learning about light and color. And Northern California completely transformed my sense of light and color. So whereas previously I was doing these abstractions based on my work in Spain, they're a little darker and heavier. I was learning about how light changes according to the location, and how water in the atmosphere, soil, plant life, it all feeds into the experience of light in the outdoors. And I started trying to fuse my abstraction with my landscape painting. And that's where I find part of my current work, which is on the next slide and the subsequent slides. My work became concerned about the shifting earth and environment, both literal and figuratively speaking, thinking about extreme weather and precipitation. You can go to the next slide. Interconnectedness of living things with the elements. And here I start to kind of play with, you can see these, what is an allusion to the embers coming through the trees. The fires were beginning a few years ago when I painted this one. And you can go to the next slide. The volatility in our climate, state of flux in the world for me started to really feed into these abstracted landscapes. And still using organic forms and still drawing somewhat from, you know, imagined forms from my head, and really inventing these landscapes from my experiences being outside, but also being in Northern California and dealing with, you know, impending fire season and drought and earthquakes. And the next slide is quite literally of fire. But drought, fire season, all these things I feel as artists, we're just always absorbing. And sometimes we don't even realize, but we've contained so much inspiration within us. I never would have thought I'd be painting these images after I came back from living abroad. But and the next one is a continuation of this, you know, extreme weather, the volatility of inundation and, you know, oversaturation. I started really playing with the idea of the medium itself dripping down the canvas and kind of dictating pathways for the paint. And the last slide of these pieces is, this one is called Spectre, and I feel like it's very timely. The steam coming off the water, when you look to the side, it's a sideways face, this kind of ghostly image that to me speaks about, you know, the teeming underworld, the sort of upside down that we're in, this idea of the mystery in the shadows and the emerging light. I feel this is a good place to explain how light in my landscapes really becomes a metaphor for truth and for hope, even amid some of the gloom. And I think it's interesting that light in our English language and many languages is synonymous with truth. So those are the pieces that to me are metaphors for geopolitics and, you know, a lot of current issues, even though they're landscapes. And then I moved into, if you want to go to the next slide, Parker, these images I call heads for my head. And these are contemporary pieces I'm doing now. I started when we sheltered in place. And these have to do with very much with women in society today. The idea that they're ambiguously, you know, colored. I didn't want to have, you know, real flesh tones in there, but I wanted to allude to the battle for women's health, the, you know, domestic violence, images of women who are in a state of anxiety and uncertainty. And you can't tell if the bleeding paint, if you want to go to the next slide, is a bruise, is it a contusion? Are her lips rosebuds, or are they actual injuries? To me, these are a continuation of that expression of where women find themselves, and doing them in tandem with my landscape watercolors. And
these are beautiful. And I know, I'm not sure how many more you want to share, but I would
that's it.
Well, I thought so, but do you want to do a quick flash on how you did the vote before we move to AmandaLynn? Or
Sure. Thank you. So this was the finished piece, the vote poster. And then the next few slides are, this is how I started with the Statue of Liberty. I painted her. I wanted her to be in there. I feel like, you know, she is such an iconic symbol. She's literally larger than life. I feel for men and women, she symbolizes freedom and equality. And I wanted a really strong, very iconic American image in there because I do love our country. I do believe in our country. I wanted to slip her in as a universal, you know, a universal and very much well-loved image. And then if you go to the next slide, you can see it's a collage. So I cut up all of these watercolors, and the watercolors were all done, you know, in reference to fire season. I wanted to very, very much make an appeal for environmental justice and for climate change awareness. And, you know, she's counting on you. I wanted to put that in there. So these are all separate pieces that I collaged together. And I really am glad that for some people, the imagery came across the way I wanted it to, with the kind of power and allusion to that very, very timely and current issue for us here in Northern California.
Thank you very much, Kathryn.
Thank you.
This has been extraordinary. When I talked to Kathryn, one of my favorite things she said was she was interested in where the freedom for women began and ended. And I just remembered that and how it resonated in your work. And then when I spoke to AmandaLynn, who's now going to come up, what I loved was through this whole process of thinking about what to talk about tonight, about truth to power, it really was about how the artist makes the invisible visible. And what I really enjoy with AmandaLynn is it's a mystery that she draws out in her paintings and on the scale of the murals. And when I asked her about it, she was talking about that the female of form and spirit are illustrated she illustrates the mystery through color and the line work. And so AmandaLynn, can we hand it over to you to talk about some of the pictures you're sharing tonight?
Sure. Thank you. I also just want to say that was really incredible. I love learning about both of your work. So nice to hear the history of somebody. You know, so often we don't get that on Instagram. Yeah, so I'm a muralist and a fine artist, and one of my favorite things to do is to collaborate, especially with women. And this is my largest collaboration ever with Lady Mags, who I created the vote piece with. Her and I met a little over a decade ago and painted a wall together and quickly became best friends and painting partners and have done nothing but that since. So this is a piece in downtown San Francisco. We painted maybe 6 or 7 years ago. I challenged her to paint the biggest graffiti piece in San Francisco at the time. And you know, it's really good because she has also challenged me to go really large. I also have a history of growing up painting with graffiti writers, but I was always the brush painter who painted sort of in the corner because I was painting with men. And once I met Lady Mags and some other female artists, they all encouraged me to get out of the corner and go bigger. So this is the two of us sort of making our mark. Unfortunately, that's not there anymore, but it's a very good memory. I don't know the order of my slides, so I will let you take them. This is a mural that I did in Grand Cayman. I, over the course of the last 2 years, have somewhat made a life and career in the Cayman Islands. It's been really transformative and magical and kind of unexpected. I went there for work, do art directing music festival, but instantly was obviously drawn to the magic of the place and all the gigantic empty walls that were everywhere. So I quickly did what I could to figure out how to be able to paint them. And what I enjoy most is learning about a place through murals. And so I went and I visited the National Gallery and I talked to some of the locals about things that they love about the island and, you know, just what makes Cayman Cayman. And I had a beautiful experience with these white butterflies, one of my first trips there. So I wanted to embody that in this piece and hopefully connect with the community and bring people out to me to start, you know, discussing what they love and just to sort of give back to this beautiful place while also creating an invitation to meet and make more art, hopefully. This is another piece by Lady Mags and I. This is in downtown Oakland. This is actually our second piece on this wall, and this was sort of our coming back together. She moved to the East Coast for a while. She is a professor and does all kinds of other incredible things with education and history. And she did a stint over on the East Coast doing that, but came back, and so this was our coming back together piece. Once again, just wanted to celebrate, you know, the place and time and the people, and so we just wanted to be bright and colorful, and it did bring people back together, which was incredible. And you know, some women in the neighborhood came and were like crying about how happy they were, you know, to have just something smiling and bright. So pretty fortunate in those experiences. This is another piece of ours that's collaborative. So we do the spray paint on the walls, and I do brush paint, she does spray paint, and then when we do fine art, Magda does a lot of abstract work, and then I create the figures over top of it. And it has really influenced my personal work, the just natural abstraction. Abstract art is something that I just love, and it's not something that comes naturally to me. So I really love the way it pushes me to become abstract by, you know, collaborating, which is part of my fascination with collaboration and learning about other artists and their inspiration. So this piece is called Console, and, you know, it's definitely a protective woman piece of, you know, holding on to what's important in yourself, but still demonstrating your beauty in a subtle way, I guess. Go to the next one. This is a piece that I was focusing on a lot of different symbols and elements for a while, you know, and just like power of vision and light. I love working with women, as I mentioned before, and I started working with some energy healers and a woman with Qigong, and really was fascinated by light and the concept of light and the connectedness of that, similar to what Kathryn was talking about. So I just wanted to sort of exemplify something like that when you're, you know, seeing through and through to the light. There's a different viewpoint, I guess.
AmandaLynn, one thing I enjoyed when you talked about a lot of these places, like even for some of these large murals, you would have, like, if children could reach the bottom part, you encourage them to be a part of it. And could you speak, just, you bring in so many other elements of the community into the pieces. Do you like to experience the neighborhood itself first, or do you just see how it evolves in the moment as you speak about these pieces?
I prefer to, you know, get to know a place. That's not always possible because you get invited to go to different countries or different locations. And so I try and get on the internet and do my research as best I can, but it's always more powerful when you learn from the people there. I usually I'm someone that comes with a sketch to a wall, and I'm very open to evolving and changing that. I have gigantic murals that have transformed due to children that have walked up and told me their story or something like that. I'm actually right now sitting in someone else's apartment because I'm painting a wall in Santa Rosa. You know, have integrated some of the local creatures that people have been talking to me about. So it's always more fun, and then it gives that person their own story behind the piece, which, you know, creating a place, a sacred place for people, is always good for everybody, I think. This particular piece I painted in Grand Cayman as a 60-foot mural, but I also created it as a painting. So I really love to do a color study and fully understand what I'm about to do on a big wall. I definitely don't always have that opportunity, but when I do, it really helps me work through a piece first. And this one's called Little Light of Mine, and definitely plays back to this experience I had on island with these white butterflies that apparently migrate and do this thing once a year. And I just was fortunate my first time there to have experienced that, and just a celebration of the, you know, plant life and beauty of the island and the people, while not trying to overly depict any particular person, but just more of like a energy. And I actually went to school for children's book illustrating. I graduated like almost 20 years ago now. So I recently created a children's book with Lady Mags called How to Know You're a Fairy. And I did that during shelter in place, and it couldn't have been a better timing for something like that. It was such a positive thing to focus on, and for it to, I literally released it the day that I got evacuated this last fire. So it all has been very transformative and has kept my mind in a happier place. So the reaction that we've gotten from that, and the way, you know, children and adults have reacted to this book, has really given purpose to my work. So this is just one of the pages, and yeah, it's called How to Know You're a Fairy, and it's got a lot of more relevant messages beyond just magic.
Magic is important.
Magic is the most important, definitely. That's what keeps me going. This one's is another, you know, I got very heavily influenced by my Caribbean lifestyle here. I was going every 2 to 3 months. I left Grand Cayman after painting a huge mural on March 15th, just to get back here before the island closed and we closed down. So I don't think that they're going to let me back, or anyone from the United States back anytime soon, but so I'm definitely missing it, but overly enjoying getting to fall back in love with Northern California as well. And this is a piece in Lancaster, California, which is also a very interesting space to visit. This was the beginning of my Sacred Alchemy series, really focusing on different alchemic symbols and the way that light and color and symbols refract and sort of gather and collect us all. And this one was called Sacred Movements and dedicated to a family member that had just passed. So it's a special piece to me. And this one is Seasons of Change, and it's in Escondido, and on the side of a gallery called Distinction Gallery. It was a really incredible experience. The woman that owns this gallery, you know, I told her I was interested in painting a mural, and she walked me outside and showed me this wall. So it's quite an honor to get to do this project. And once again, it introduced me to the town. I did a solo show inside and spent 10 days grinding on this wall, and you know, was able to meet every sort of character in that back alley. So, you know, it's my favorite part, is to just, there really isn't, you know, old, young, there's always some funny story and weird stories that happen. That's the best part about painting murals. So this is actually one that I changed. This one's titled Violet, for a little girl that lives around the corner, and the birds are holding some violets there. Heard she was really shy and she never came. I saw her every day, but then finally her dad brought her one of the last days and made her walk up to me and give me some candy, and then she told me her name and told me, you know, how special this has been to her, and her dad told me she'd been having a hard time. So I dedicated this piece to her, and it's in Port Adelaide in Australia, which is a really incredible place. And I met some really special people there. So it's just really celebrating nature and beauty and children, I guess.
Thank you, AmandaLynn. Hearing from each of you, I just love hearing the descriptions, and I could talk to you both all for like 2 hours or 3 hours to hear more. I would love to hear how each of you riff on each other, having reminded or heard or seen something. But unfortunately, the hour is coming up, and I would love to close with a question from Amy. First of all, right now, we're in the middle of a pandemic, devastated wildfires and hurricane season, protests about racial injustice, major issues like Obamacare and Roe versus Wade, which will be coming before the Supreme Court very soon. And it's all less than a week before Election Day. Did I forget something? I think pretty much covers it. This is Amy's question. I want to give her full credit. Cindy and I worked on some of the other ones, but hers was, regardless of how the election goes, I would like to hear from each of you for a minute or two. With all there is to do in this day and age, social justice, climate change, all of those things we mentioned, we know no matter what the work is far from over. What do you each see your superpower on going on as an artist? And let's start with Kathryn. Kathryn, or do you want to think for a minute? Bud, who we'll give AmandaLynn a moment. Kathryn or Bud, please jump in.
But okay, I'll do it. I want to continue with, I was really, first of all, the Vote project was just so exciting, because I really do believe art is about communication and about our shared humanity and finding a way to let each other know we're not alone. And if I can continue to bring to light my interest in the environment and climate change and the sort of state of flux that we are in with my work, I want to do it. I would love to do more public art and collaborate with these amazing women that I just met. So that's what I would like to see happen, hopefully.
Great, great. Bud?
I would love to, I want to be an example for others, and I want to help encourage others to follow their true, authentic journeys, because I think if we all are doing what makes us happy, that this world is going to come so fast into alignment, it'll just be like right before our eyes. You know, if we can find a way to do things that bring us joy every day, get us into a good place to move forward, we're going to be so inspired to take action. All of us are, and we're going to be inspired from a place of joy and a place of healing and a place of love. And I just want to encourage others to do that and to find that voice within themselves, because I do think everyone has an artist in them. I do believe that we are sort of steered away from our creative selves as young people, and I just want to encourage to bring that back in adults and kids the same. So
Wonderful. AmandaLynn?
I think I agree with both of those sentiments. All I want to do is paint more and teach and inspire everybody. So I think that collectively that is the answer, is no matter what happens, we definitely all need to keep creating and using our voice in that way.
I think for me, what you all reminded me of is the power to listen to oneself, to respond when you see a need and to address it, and to have the courage to do that, and the courage of all of you with your projects. I mean, none of you think small, you all think big. It's just so encouraging in this time, because as things have warped and perceptions have changed, it's almost like a call to action just by looking at each of your works. And I just really want to thank you for that, because we need to have many voices, and we need to be able to agree to disagree. We need to be able to do so much as a society as a whole. So I would like to thank the Battle to Beat Cancer for hosting us today. As I said, I could go on for another 2 or 3 hours, but I'm respectful of everyone's time. Please get out and vote. That's the whole reason we all want everyone to participate and vote together, and no one be silent. I would also hope that, you know, please support Battle to Beat Cancer. I love the attitude that it's not just about beating it, but defeating cancer. Since unfortunately, I think sadly, cancer has touched so many of our lives. So I hope everyone encourage others to vote, even if you've already voted. And thank you very much for this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you
all so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Parker, too.
Yeah, thank you, Parker. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
stay in touch. Maybe we should all tell each other our Instagrams really fast. And
Yes, go for it.
Yes, go for it.
okay, mine is at bud_snow, and my website is doyouknowbudsnow.net. I'll put it in the chat too.
Perfect.
Great. Everyone, AmandaLynn?
My Instagram's Alyn Paint, and Lady Mag's Instagram is lady_mags.
Great. Kathryn?
Kathryn_St, ST Clair artist. And my website's KathrynStClair.com with no punctuation.
That's great. And for those of you who would like to see the exhibit Get Out and Vote, which they all participated in, you can go to the Petaluma Art Center, or also DEEDSGetOutandVote.art. Thank you again, everybody. And you can find the links to all of their websites too, also. So if you forget. So thank you very much, everybody. And bye-bye.
Bye.